Okay, I don't know where that one cut off. Sorry about that. I thought I had enough space. I didn't, and I didn't really want to re-record 15 minutes. So, we will resume with the discussion on Scarecrow. So in case it cut off, I'll reread quickly. Dorothy leaned her chin upon her hand and gazed thoughtfully at the Scarecrow. Its head was a small sack stuffed with straw, with eyes, nose, and mouth painted on it to represent a face. An old, pointed blue hat that had belonged to some munchkin was perched on his head. The rest of the figure was a blue suit of clothes, worn and faded, which had also been stuffed with straw. On the feet were some old boots with blue tops, such as every man wore in this country, and the figure was raised above the stalks of corn by means of the pole stuck up its back. Dorothy obviously first meets the Scarecrow in the field of corn. If you subscribe to the parable of populism, the Scarecrow represents the farmers. To a little girl who grows up in a farm, a Scarecrow is pretty normal for her to see. So, of course, to her surprise, this one's alive. There is really no explanation given. He explains to Dorothy he was made the day before yesterday, and that he just sort of came to life from these paints. In a later book, there is a whole backstory given to the Scarecrow that's kind of random. And there are people that live under the cornfield, and that's part of how it all worked. It's been a while, so I'm a little hazy on the details. So, subsequently, Scarecrow is very generally in blue, because of the country of the Munchkins. After the events of Wizard, of course, he gets his brain. The Wizard leaves him in charge of Emerald City, which takes us into the second book in the series, The Marvelous Land of Oz, which was originally intended to be a sequel to the stage musical, and be the further adventures of the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman. Because the comedy team of Montgomery and Stone, who played the original Scarecrow and Tin Man, were such a huge hit, they wanted to capitalize it, and ultimately it didn't happen. But when you read the book, it actually reads very much like an old early 1900s musical comedy of the day, including Soldier Girls and some ridiculousness and some clever special effects. And we learn in the Marvelous Land of Oz, sometimes shortened to just the Land of Oz, that the true ruler of Oz is not the Scarecrow, but actually the Queen, is actually Princess Ozma, who has been disguised as a boy, and that brings up its own issues. So the Scarecrow in the second book is the primary king of Oz, and then after those events, he goes and lives in the land of the West with the Tin Woodman, who's his best friend. And he lives in a castle made of corn, and they have wacky misadventures, like you do in a magical fairyland when you're a Scarecrow and your best friend is a man made out of tin. The Scarecrow is one of the most enduring characters of the series. Of course, one of the most iconic, along with Dorothy, Tin Man, and Lion. He ends up, he's the subject, actually, he's the subject of his own book, The Scarecrow of Oz, which was written by Baum. He shows up in just about every Oz book there is. I'm really hard-pressed to come up with one where he isn't there in some capacity. He is used in Wicked. I won't say how, because I don't want to spoil. Although I don't agree with the way they did it, be that as it may. The Scarecrow is also one of the characters, of the many Oz characters, Tin Man is probably reinterpreted the most, with Scarecrow being probably the second most. He's nearly always fairly tall and thin. However, this is a bit of a dichotomy. And it's interesting because more modern illustrators are starting to take a different approach to both Scarecrow and, to a degree, Tin Man. Scarecrow being made from Munchkin clothes is probably going to be about the same height Dorothy is. So, very frequently now, he's much smaller. Now, that doesn't mean that a tall Scarecrow wouldn't be possible because that would be more imposing to the crows, but as we learn, the crows see right through him and tell him he doesn't have a brain, and that's why he's so willing to join Dorothy on her way to Emerald City. He is probably Dorothy's truest friend, which is particularly true in the MGM film. And as is evidence, I mean, he's very intelligent after encountering the wizard. So he's always really, I think, been my favorite of the three friends. So there you kind of go. I like the ideas that Brooke brought into this. I like the use of purple. I love those purple cowboy boots. Probably more than I should. They're just so fantastic. So yeah. I think this is one of, and I know Brooke and I discussed that we really love the Scarecrow. I really love her use of color on him. It was really fun to use the variegated flosses that gave him that sort of weathered, I've been outside sort of appearance. And again, eventually I will do an all blue Scarecrow. Because I can. The Scarecrow, obviously, his big fear is a lighted match. He does get wet a few times, and has to be dried out. He gets rescued by a stork at one point in the original book. So there are several instances of mild misfortune happening to him. Obviously, the most dangerous being when the Wicked Witch captures them and he's de-stuffed. Yeah, so there you go. That's kind of my little bitty thoughts on Scarecrow. So, this one was short. It'll be up shortly, and I will see you all next week.